Thank you so much for being on the programme. It's our first time, I think.
Yes, I've been dying to do it for ages, so thank you.
No, not at all. Thanks for coming on. Let's crack straight on, shall we, and talk about the immigration policy that was being discussed today. So you're announcing plans to try and stop housing migrants in hotels. When do you expect to be able to say that, look, no more people are going to be in these hotels?
Well, clearly what we need to do is get enough accommodation, so that's been what the focus has been. And I don't think hotels were ever meant to be long-term, and clearly at a cost of £6 million a day, they're definitely not meant to be long-term. I mean, that's taxpayers' money. So, but we have been trying to, work on getting more accommodation. So I think what we're trying to do now is get ahead of the plans. So we've got four major sites, and then we'll look at also other options as well.
So no date then, really, that you can give us?
They'll be working on dates. I can't give you a date, but they'll be working on, when they're going to try and get enough, accommodation. We know that we need enough accommodation, and, that's what I know my colleague Robert Jenrick's been working on.
Is it really suitable to house families, children even, in disused military sites? Are you comfortable with that?
Well, obviously we need to make sure that they are, they're decent, they're clean, and they're decent accommodation. But I think it is, it's a basic offer, but it is an offer that I think is decent enough, as it were.
What does decent enough mean?
Well, it's got, the facilities that you need, it's clean, it's maybe not luxurious, but it's certainly, safe and decent and clean.
Are you expecting legal challenges on this?
I don't know, to be honest. I haven't
looked at that.
I mean, we have lots of legal challenges in this space, but and that's part of the problem has been delaying some aspects of the longer-term solutions as well, which is the Rwanda solution for
those that are coming going there yet.
Well, those that are coming here illegally, obviously that is the plan. No, I mean we did win the case in the court, the High Court, but of course it's now on appeal, so we still need to go through those legal challenges. But there have been a number of legal challenges which have held us up, yes.
OK. Now, I just want to talk to you about strikes, because this is what so many of our viewers are going to be really impacted by, whether they've got children at school, of course, seeing the school closures that we've seen due to strike action. Now, you've offered teachers what you're describing as a final offer pay deal. What exactly is it?
Well, it's what I've offered. It's a fair and reasonable offer is how I've described it. So what we asked to do is we asked the teachers to pause their strikes, the teachers' union. There's only one teachers' union, actually, the NEU, that are on strike. And we asked them to pause their strikes, actually at the same time as the nurses, and come in and have those talks about, what we could offer. And what we did is we opened up again the 22-23 pay after we'd agreed, the independent pay review body, their recommendations. They didn't accept that straight away, so they had 5 more days of strikes, which are really disappointing, and they are disruptive to children, and they are disruptive to parents as well. And, we're very concerned about that, concerned about kids that need to catch up, concerned about exam cohorts, etc.
So just to be crystal clear, what is the offer on the table?
The offer is, so we've reopened 22-23. It's £1,000 for every school teacher and school leader. So that is a one-off payment. It's worth a different percentage depending on where you are, but it's £1,000 for all. And then for the 23-24 pay, which we would normally go to an independent pay review body, we've offered 4.5%. And the inflation period at that time, obviously the OBR have done a forecast as part of the budget. So that goes from September 23 to 24.
It's not as much
Inflation's less than 2% at that period of time.
It's not as much as they've got in Scotland, is it? They've been offered a 7% rise between April 2022 and March 2023, 5% between April and December 2023, and then a 2% increase. Why are teachers in Scotland worth more?
Well, we've said all along that we are not trying to, match the Scottish or we have very different pay structures, and they're very different roles as well. So we have our own responsibilities, and clearly here.
Different pay structures, different roles. I mean, like most teachers would think, look, you're in schools, you deserve a decent wage.
Yeah, but the pay structures are actually quite complex. It's not just... Everybody talks about these headline figures. There's actually a lot of progression pay. So actually this year...
actually what you're offering for more established teachers is actually lower than those of new starters as well, isn't it? So...
No, I mean, it depends on where you are. There's progression pay as well. It is actually much more complex with the the headline figures are what you talk about. But the offer we've made is £1,000 lump sum and 4.5% when average earnings are predicted to be 2.3 and inflation is predicted to be below 2%. So I think that's a fair and reasonable offer. I mean, obviously, as the UK government, we have the responsibility for the economy. We've got the responsibility of halving inflation. We've got the responsibility of making sure we get that fair balance between the taxpayer, who obviously pays for this, and, the public sector workers. So we alone have that balance to do.
You mentioned the average pay, and I do think it's important to compare what teachers are seeing as opposed to other professions as well, because what some teachers' unions would argue is that, look, they've had a long time of squeezed pay. And I think we can just have a look quickly now. This is the Office for National Statistics, real-term pay rises since 2011. You can see train drivers, and then the private sector, the public sector, nurses, and all the way down at the bottom is teachers. You can see why they'd be feeling a little bit hard done by if you looked at that, going back to 2012.
Yeah, so the point that they make is there have been a couple of years over this period where teachers didn't get a pay rise. So I think there was a couple of years in, at the beginning when obviously there was no money left, as it were, as the note said. And then there was, I think, a period in the pandemic as well, when obviously we decided to put public resources to the furlough scheme.
But this is comparing it to other professions, right? Train drivers, nurses, things in the public sector. These are all facing the same cost pressures, right?
Yeah, but
so
people have different. They're all different on different salaries, and they all have different terms and conditions, and they all have different progression pay as well. So they're all very different. So they are quite difficult to compare. But the point they're making is there was a few years where they didn't get a pay rise, and if you add up real term rises, then they want to make up for that. Well, that's why we've said. I mean, this year we've offered an extra £1,000, and that's why if you look at the 4.5% that we've offered for next year, inflation during that period, September to September, is expected to be way below 2%.
Well, I mean,
so that will start to be above inflation.
If inflation last month actually outstripped what many people were expecting, and food price inflation, which, is a lot of what people
We know we've had a spike in inflation.
Their salaries on is expecting
We
to be
know
much
we've had a spike in inflation. We know the reasons why. We know all the individual drivers. So do the OBR, and the OBR obviously have made their forecast. And that's all we can take, to be honest. That's, they're the forecasts that we're using to try and we're predicting into the future, right? This is a pay rise for the future. And that's what the independent pay review body will do.
Predicting to the future as well, you've got a teacher recruitment crisis brewing, right? If you look at the National Foundation of Educational Research, the target for teacher recruitment for next year is 100%. There's only going to be 79% of the primary school teachers needed and 58% of the secondary school teachers. Sounds like a crisis waiting to happen.
So what we did in recruitment, and it is obviously vital that you recruit the best
you
graduates.
You must be worried about this, surely. Your Education Secretary, you must be looking at these figures and taking a step back thinking, oh, my goodness
Absolutely.
me.
So that's why we put in place bursaries. So actually, it's not all equal across all subjects, and it's not equal. We have had post-pandemic...
Yeah, if you look at classics and physical education, that's OK. But actually, if you look at, primary school teachers, if you look at
Primary school usually is OK. This is the first time, because we've got this dislocated labour impact post the pandemic. So there are everything from heavy goods drivers to nurses, pretty much everything, to restaurants, everything, there is a shortage of wages. That's why the whole
only
budget...
only one of these professions teaches the children.
But all of those, that's why the whole budget was really aimed at getting more people back into work and to making sure that we've got the people to grow. However, you're right, we need to recruit the best teachers. We need to retain the best teachers. And I'm 100% committed to do that. So when we put in place a retention and recruitment strategy, we've also said we will look to update that as well, because clearly you can't have a first-class, world-class education system without fantastic teachers. So 100%. And I've done this many times, in my long business career. I've lots of times had to face, workforce shortages or skills challenges, and you have to put a plan in place. The plan in place includes bursaries. It also includes increasing graduate salaries as well to make it competitive. So we have put bursaries up to £29,000 in place for some of these subject areas. So we're not sat there ignoring this, but there is a pandemic impact as well.
I asked if people had questions for you before the interview, and a lot of people were asking, how can schools fund a pay rise when you're not getting any new money? So Rob Boyce, an assistant head teacher, how does she expect any school to fund a pay rise for staff without implementing redundancies? Schools are operating with skeleton staff as it is. We can't recruit. Megan Pacey, who works in early childhood education, how can schools, many of whom budgets are in deficit or near deficit and who rely on fundraising to provide basic learning materials like art resources and books, how can they pay for the desperately needed salary increases on an unfunded basis?
This is absolutely a fair question. So when I first started the job, which was the end of October, waiting for me was a letter from all the unions actually saying to fund the pay rises that the independent pay review body had recommended, 5.4% on average for 22-23. Obviously, we've now added £1,000 to that. They said we need £2 billion extra and to our other inflationary pressures as well, you know, energy costs, etc. So the very first thing I had to do within 2 weeks of the job was to go to the Chancellor for the autumn statement and get £2 billion extra for this year and for next year. Now, we've secured that. It will be going into schools' budgets shortly, so there is extra money coming. Now, that is for, you know...
Pay rises that were agreed before.
They were already agreed. Now, on top of that, what we've said is we will fully fund the £1,000 because that's not going to be within those budgets. Because of where the other things that school budgets are looking at, so in particular energy costs, we think that the school budgets, and the IFS actually have confirmed this as well, can probably fund up to about 4% of next year's pay rise, but that leaves 0.5% delta. So in total, if I take those two together, that would be £620 million extra that I would have to find new money for schools. So, and we've said that, we've committed to that. I mean, clearly, schools, we don't expect them to give head teachers the problem of £1,000 for everybody, but not knowing how to fund it. So we will be funding that. And I think it's really important because if I look at Twitter, which I try not to, but I sometimes have to, but if you look at Twitter, if you look at other things, I don't think, and listen to those questions, most people seem to have missed the £2 billion that was fully funded the last time, and the fact that we're funding this.
People haven't missed the money that was given in the autumn statement. This is additional cost pressures on schools that they have to try and find in addition to the money that was given before. And let's not forget, of course...
Well, it hasn't actually gone yet.
Schools have had...
It's been announced.
A decade.
It's been announced. They haven't had it in their budget yet.
They've had a decade of what many would describe as underfunding. I'm just wondering...
I'd like to pick you up on that point, because if you listen to the IFS, they've now said with the additional...
Let's have a look at the IFS
money,
chart.
yes,
Shall we?
yeah, because the additional...
Let's have a look at the graphic from the IFS. So this is the school funding percentage of change per pupil since, you can see the line 2010 when the Conservatives first entered power, and you can see the private schools line in blue and the state schools line in red.
And I think it stops a year early. So if you go up to where we would be now with all the money we've announced...
Is my point, which is we're talking about the decade of what many people would describe as underfunding.
Well, if you look at this line, I think it is really an important line to look at. There was one bumper year, which was 2010. So that year, just as they were leaving office, there was a huge rise in the budget. It wasn't there all the way through. It was a huge rise. And then, of course, they left us with no money, etc. But if you take this now to where we are today, we are now back £58.8 billion, which is the highest we've ever funded schools in history. So it is important to say that, because as of this next year, that extra £2 billion, when it's added to the budget, that's where we'll be. And it is important, by the way.
You've got answers to all of the questions. You've got lots of stats to throw. You're saying that these can't be compared. This is be quibbled over. Do you get how worried parents are right now?
Yeah.
You know, the teachers are striking, kids are not in school, many of them who've missed time during the pandemic, they're looking at school funding and they're worried. Do you get that?
Well, they shouldn't worry about the school funding, because the money extra money...
Well, even the parents who are being asked to, fund things like art supplies, like paper, like books.
£58.8 billion is a lot of money we're spending on schools, so they shouldn't be worried about that.
OK.
And the extra money is coming for the budgets, but the most important thing is I want teachers to know, because they'll be having to ballot on this now, they'll be having to vote. The £1,000 and the 4.5%, there will be extra funding to make sure that schools can afford that. And if we don't have this agreement, which, we've done our best, I spent a couple of weekends ago with them, we've, gone till early hours, etc., to try and thrash out as much as we can. Then what we will do is we'll go to the independent pay review process. They will come up with something for 23-24, but they won't come up with anything for 22-23. So it is important that they know that, because it is funded, and I do want them to have it.
we are out of time. There is so much stuff that I want to talk to you about, not least your own background. You know, you went to a comprehensive school, started an apprenticeship at 16, so hopefully get the opportunity
And I really
to
care about this,
interview
Sophie,
as well.
and the reason I know all the facts and figures is because I want to be fair. I don't want, I want to know if it's actually, are we funding schools enough? Are kids going to get the best education?
And I think
are we paying teachers enough to make sure that we get enough teachers?
And the answers to those questions, of course, people will have very different views on. But thank you very much for being on the programme indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie.